Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. So, Merry Christmas to you all if you celebrate Christmas. If not, Happy Holidays. So I'll be taking a short break over this weekend for the holiday season, so there won't be a video from me for this weekend. But rest assured, there will be more content coming up soon for you guys for the last week of 2020. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, without further ado, let's jump into today's video. By the way, if you guys have some free time over the holiday season and you're wanting something to read, well, I actually wrote a book. So if you're wondering why I have so many copies of this thing back there, it's because this is my book, right? It's called Financial Independence Theory, and it's available on Amazon in a link down below in the description if you want to pick it up. So you guys know I'm not a big believer in courses at all because, well, this is the course, right? And it's free on YouTube forever. But if you want the book, it's a much more detailed explanation of all things finance from my perspective, and also share some life stories from like my own personal life in there as well. So if you guys are interested in that, it's completely optional. You guys don't have to buy it if you don't want to. But if you guys do, it will help me out, helps out this channel, and it would be greatly appreciated. So I'm just letting you know it exists. Now, anyways, let's jump into today's topic. So, I can't believe I've never made a dedicated video on the almighty Apple until now. But here it is. And I'm not going to explain the background info on Apple because obviously you guys all pretty much know what it is already. I mean, if you don't know what Apple is by now, I can't help you, right? So, many of you are probably watching this on an Apple device right now. Now regarding the stock though, it's been pretty much going up in like a straight line, pretty much at all-time highs at the moment. Now you guys know I don't like buying stocks at all-time highs, but there's been a few pieces of news that I think that has intrigued me to potentially maybe picking up some shares of Apple, whereas before I was more hesitant in the past. But from now on, I'm like more on the fence after reading the news, okay? So what are the news items? Well, the first thing is Apple's Silicon Macs. Now, a bit of background on this for those of you who aren't big tech nerds like me. Well, there's actually two types of platforms for CPUs that drive our everyday devices in case you're not aware. So there's what's called the x86 architecture, and there's called what's called ARM, so ARM. So x86 is what computers use mostly right now. So if you think of your typical Intel and AMD processors, those are all x86. Except for the new like Apple MacBooks that are running the new Apple Silicon, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But except for those, all the new laptops that are coming out these days with Intel and AMD, they're all x86. And x86 is better for more computationally complex tasks. So the downside is that it doesn't focus that much on saving power, and it generates a lot more heat compared to ARM. So you don't have to understand the details of this, but essentially your phones and your tablets, the reason why you don't need a fan on, say, this iPad or on your cell phone, is because your cell phone and your tablets are running ARM, or running ARM. So the battery also lasts much longer than a laptop battery because your phone and tablet is running that ARM processor and is more power efficient than your typical x86 processor. So if you're thinking, okay, great, it sounds like ARM is better in terms of power consumption and there's a lot of benefits, but what about the performance of ARM CPUs versus x86? Well, here's the big kicker, right? So ARM processors, especially Apple's ARM processors, have been making improvements much quicker than Intel and AMD x86 processors recently, and it's now at a point where the performance is on par, if not just exceeding your typical laptop of what your typical laptop is capable of putting out. So in fact, if you have a later gen iPhone or iPad, like for example this one, this is the 2018 iPad Pro. So the new iPad Pro and probably this one is apparently, according to Apple, faster than like 90% of all laptops that are for sale right now. So I can't find the exact figure, so I can't verify whether or not it is exactly 90%, but it's the vast majority of laptops that are on the market right now. The iPad is faster than the vast majority. So it seems like you're getting a lot of benefits from using ARM, right, without suffering a lot of the drawbacks. So if we switch from x86 to ARM for laptops too, you're asking, well, why haven't we done that, right? Why haven't we all switched to ARM on the computers yet? Well, it's because the big stumbling block is that you need software support. So our operating systems that we rely on every day, like older versions of macOS and the current version of Windows 10, are all designed to run on x86. So it's not so easy just to jump over to ARM. And even if you do, you kind of have to wait for app developers to make versions of their software that supports ARM. So it's going to take years for that kind of ARM transition, which Apple has already begun doing with their new line of ARM processors that are based on the M1 chips. That's what they're calling them. So the macOS Big Sur, which is their latest version of macOS, that brings software support for ARM processors. So, all in all, I think this transition is really worth it. And if anyone can do it, it's Apple. So the great Dave 2D actually made a review video of the new ARM MacBooks and the new ARM Mac Mini. So he gave a glowing review of them, by the way. So I'll link to his video down below in the description in case you want to check out that review. So I highly recommend it if you're at all interested in this type of stuff at all. But let me just summarize the results for you right now, right? I can say, like, holy crap, right? The M1 Macs are far outperforming the current gen Macs in terms of both single core and multi-core performance, especially multi-core. And the M1 MacBook Air gets 18 hours of battery. So I'm not sure if people really understand the gravity of that situation. Like, just let that sink in for a moment, right? 18 hours of battery. Think about that for a second. A typical gaming laptop these days gets like 4 hours of battery, right? So the fact that you're able to get 18 hours of battery on a laptop is just absolutely amazing. So I hear it all the time where people say that Apple has stopped innovating, Apple has stagnating, and I really have to disagree, right? So, I mean, Apple does do some stupid stuff from time to time, like they put out a pair of headphones that are like $550 US, yeah, that's like absolutely ridiculous, right? But I want you to forget about that for a second, right? So just forget about the AirPods Max. That's just like smoke and mirrors, right? Let's focus on what's important. And at the end of the day, it's not a big deal for Apple anyways with the AirPods Max. So the AirPods Max, they could completely fail. Let's say if no one buys them, let's say if they completely fail as a product and Apple has to cancel them, it would not affect Apple's stock price at all. It's like a very non-important product to Apple. But what I'm seeing from the M1 Max, however, this is really game-changing, and that's where the money is at. And this is what really matters to Apple because it affects their entire line of Macs, right? So in case you didn't know, they're going to transition the entire line of Macs. So eventually every Mac is going to run their M1 processor instead of using Intel. So that's what the exciting news is to me. So I think that this is being underappreciated or being ignored by the market, and people are not going to really realize the implications of how big this is until we get a lot of applications and a lot of software support for the M1 Max. And by the time that happens, which is going to happen very soon within the next few years, once that happens, I feel like people are going to see, wow, this M1 Mac is the same price if not cheaper than what you would pay for an Intel Mac, and this is just, or an Intel laptop in general, and the M1 is just so much better, right? And also, not to mention, they're going to put out new versions of their silicon chips too. So Apple might come out with their M2 version of their ARM processor soon, right? So usually when it comes to generation products, when it comes to a first generation product, the first generation is usually not that good, right? So already we have an M1 processor that is already exceeding expectations, but the jump from M1 to M2 will be the greatest, one of the greatest jumps ever, right? So usually if you look at tech trends, the jump from a first generation product to a second generation product is usually the biggest jump in a very long time. So if you think about how big of a jump it was from the iPad original to the iPad 2, well, they stuck with the iPad 2 form factor for quite a while before they moved on. If you look at the iPhone, let's say, right, the iPhone original, and they jumped up to the iPhone 3G, which was the second one, I think that was quite a big jump, right? So all in all, the jump from the first generation to the second generation is probably going to be huge. And if we're talking about Apple Silicon, I can't wait to see, quite frankly, what M2 is going to look like. I think it's going to be absolutely amazing. So that's number one. And number two is that we've been hearing about Apple potentially getting into the car industry by developing their own cars. And I thought that this was very interesting, okay? So after this news came out, Elon Musk tweeted that at one point he tried to get a meeting with Tim Cook about about potentially selling Tesla to Apple, because at the time Tesla was not doing so well. And at the time, the valuation of Tesla was about a tenth of what it is right now. So it was around like $60 billion company as opposed to $600 billion, right? And Tim Cook refused to take the meeting. Now, obviously, I think this was a huge blunder on Apple's part. If you could just imagine if the deal went through, if Apple actually ended up buying Tesla, we would be living in a very different world than we are right now. I mean, if you just look at Apple's market cap and then you look at Tesla's current market cap, well, if you put those two together, you can easily see the combined business being worth $3 trillion or close to $3 trillion at least. But that didn't happen, and I think that Apple has this unfulfilled desire to get into the car industry. And from what I heard from the internet, now this is just rumors at the point, but what I heard from the internet, Apple is a lot farther along the car development program than we previously thought. A lot farther along on the battery technology too. So I watched this video from Gally from Hyperchange, which I'll link below down in the description as well. You guys know I'm a big fan of Gally from Hyperchange. And Gally was talking about the possibility of Apple merging with, or not merging, but partnering with Lucid in order to make their cars. So if you don't know who Lucid is a car company that's founded by the former engineering chief at Tesla, and they have some really nice looking cars, which granted are not available for sale just yet, but Lucid's cars kind of give off the Apple vibe, if you know what I mean, at least to me, right? I'll show some pictures right now and you guys can be the judge. And yeah, basically Lucid is building this manufacturing facility in Arizona, which is great news for Apple, because what Apple lacks and where Tesla is far outpacing them is when it comes to manufacturing. So Tesla has a bunch of gigafactories everywhere, obviously, right? So I think, in fact, the one that's being built in Austin right now is technically called a Terra factory, but yeah, so Tesla has a bunch of factories everywhere, and Apple obviously doesn't have the ability to manufacture cars at the moment. So what Gally said in his video made a lot of sense, at least to me. So not only would Apple be gaining a manufacturing facility where they can make their goals become a reality, they're also kind of getting back at Tesla and Elon Musk by working with a former Tesla engineer and kind of supporting their rivals, right? Because as nice as Lucid looks, they're much too small to be able to compete with Tesla in any meaningful way anytime soon. So we're talking about, what, like a $2 billion valuation? So I think back in 2018, they were valued at like $1 billion. Lucid, right? Not Tesla. Lucid was valued at around like $1 billion or so. So let's just say that by now they hit like a $2 billion market cap, right? So that's only still $2 billion, which if you compare Tesla's valuation right now, Tesla's at like a almost $700 billion valuation. So Lucid is barely a blip compared to where Tesla is right now. So if Lucid can team up with Apple, then that's a different story, right? So Apple's definitely good at software, and if we believe that cars in the future are all going to be tech products, well, that's the future I believe in, by the way, right? Then someday that when cars become tech products, software will be a very important part of a car's value proposition to the consumer. And by software, I don't just mean like the infotainment system or something like that, and the navigation and whatnot. So what I mean is by software is actual like self-driving technology. And if anyone besides Tesla can have a real shot at self-driving technology, I believe that is going to be Apple and their team of already great engineers, right? So we know that Apple has pretty much some of the best engineers in the industry, and obviously Apple has much more capital compared to some other players like a NIO or XPEV. So overall, I'm still seeing a lot of growth avenues for Apple, and quite frankly, it's really hard to hate on Apple at the moment. So even if you don't like Apple products or you don't like what Apple stands for, you gotta admit that the company itself is an amazing company from a business perspective, right? They're super great at generating free cash flow. They're super great at generating profits. And it's just a cash flow machine, right? It's just a profit machine. And despite the stock being at all-time highs, with those like couple of tidbits of news that just came out, I'm actually tempted to buy into Apple despite it being at all-time highs. So I'm tempted to just open up a position and maybe just average down if the stock ever goes down, right? I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments down below. Should I buy into Apple? What are your opinions on Apple? And what are your opinions on the few pieces of news I just shared with you? Once again, a Merry Christmas to you all and Happy Holidays if you don't celebrate Christmas. So I'll see you guys in the last week of December, and there'll be a couple more videos, and then it's going to be New Year soon. So Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. So be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing if you like this series. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram as always, links down below in the description. So with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!